All right, we are live. Welcome to Off the Wall Novels with special guest Noah Clemens of Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse in a crossover episode about Infinite Jest.
Boom.
All right, so Noah here just finished Infinite Jest for the first time, and this is a book that I've had the opportunity to read twice now, and so we wanted to do kind of a loose conversation just about this amazing book and our reactions to it. So welcome, Noah.
Thank you, Daniel. It's awesome to be back hanging out with you. It's good reading and good conversations over here at Off the Wall Novels, and I try to do good stuff on my channel as well. Infinite Jest is something that I, like you said, just finished reading. Didn't really know what I was getting into. I don't think anybody ever really does with it. It's so much on its own level.
Just hearing your reactions on your channel and in the voice messages you sent me, it seemed like it was like a toll that it was taking on your life. Like you seemed like worn out. I remember
Oh, it definitely was so much that I was kind of keeping in my head in the read that I didn't do much else. I didn't make much content. I wasn't reading anything else. I wasn't able to really give. I didn't want to give to anything else. I wanted to really, try to understand what was going on.
So, because you and I kind of read it at different periods, because you're obviously a much more experienced reader than I would have been when I read this when I was like 18. And so, did you feel like in one read through you got a kind of comprehensive view of what he was going for? Obviously you can't get everything on the first read, but like what are your thoughts on like this as a whole before we get into like nitty gritty?
Yeah, take a look at the whole wood before we examine individual trees if we can. I don't think that I could say with any confidence how much of it I think that I got, because it's just there's so much. There is some kind of wonderful themes and like arcs that run through it, but there's so much detail to the story that individual narratives, individual plot points, or even phrases that contribute to it, all of them have a tendency to get lost or muddled in the overwhelming detail. And like whatever I've kept after the first reading that was poignant to me or like really struck me, something that I thought about over and over to keep into the mind, I think I am a critical reader. I think that I did a fine job, but of course I think I could listen to anybody talk about it who's read it more than once, and the kind of things they're going to say are going to blow my mind, are going to push me, or expand me even more, because there's so much to it. I saw the narratives complementing each other so much. There's so many little plot devices, even like somebody losing their legs, for example, and it plays out between multiple different characters that seemingly don't have any connection, but that's in there or something. It's just weird. These kind of there's so many smaller connections like that, and then larger connections as well. So it's wild. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is truly overwhelming, just the amount of detail and how he connects all of these threads just barely, like it's almost like he just makes just enough of a connection between these different plot points for you to piece it together if you're like really paying attention. And the rest of it, it's not that it's filler, because it's all extremely valuable information, but he somehow makes this compelling story the least important part of what's going on in Infinite Jest, with Hal ending up holding himself's head with the entertainment in it, which is, I guess, like chronologically one of the last things that happened. I don't think it's the very last, but one of them. And these like pretty wild cinematic moments are just kind of peppered in there, and then the rest of it almost gets into like essay format, and these like I think that's one of the things that really struck me the first time that I read it, is that there was narrative action, and then it would just be him like talking to you about like values and observations that he had taken from being in Alcoholics Anonymous in Boston.
Right. I will say, I mean, something that you brought up that we were talking about, the fact that I had read a lot, coming at from a different place, and I had read more David Foster Wallace before coming into contact with this
Sure.
than you had before you came in contact with this. I will say that I didn't expect David Foster Wallace to do. I didn't expect what Infinite Jest is. Of course, there's a lot of sadness and a lot of, this kind of hypercritical melancholy or malaise that comes through in David Foster Wallace. But there's so much humor in David Foster Wallace that, there's stuff that's outright comedy. The Broom of the System is a wonderful example of complete comedy. It's wonderful. Infinite Jest is like the saddest book that I've ever read.
Really?
Period. Like, it's so sad. And even in the group, I read it with a group of people, so I've gotten more out of it because of that as well, just having conversation through reading it. And when some of the people would point out a joke and something that was really funny, there's a lot of funny parts. David Foster Wallace is very funny, but it in no way overshadowed or even held a candle to the depth of pain and giving up on life. Wasted life is a wasted life is something that is explored big time in Infinite Jest, and it's so sad. It was hard to get through, but the AA meeting stuff and Don Gately's character ended up being my favorite parts. I resonated with that, or got more out of those sections, so much more than I ever got out of the Enfield Tennis Academy and Hal's story, for example. I get more out of Hal's family and the kind of crazy stuff involved with his family and his father and the tape and Joel and all that than I ever got out of Hal and his own descent or his own addiction, kind of taking hold, something like this. Gately was a far more relatable character to me, I guess, than this, yuppie, antisocial kind of almost rich, whatever.
Sure. Well, that's interesting, because I had almost the exact opposite experience, because like I went to an all boys prep school and have always throughout my life been like prone to social isolation, and I've had many issues with marijuana in the past. And so when I read this when I was 18, is I don't know if I've ever identified with a character more in my entire life. That being said, though, I think that within the Alcoholics Anonymous parts, I don't know if I've ever been more uplifted by a book, because he offers this moral advice and then packages it in such a way that is like targeted at someone who is like hyper intellectual, very lost in their own thoughts,
Right,
addicted to
right,
themselves. And it the whole process of him, you can really see David Foster Wallace outside of the story trying to wrestle with his own mind of being like, just accept the cliche, don't
right,
unpack it, don't worry
right.
about it too much, just like just go with it. And then that, especially within this postmodern framing where you're not supposed to believe in these overarching morals and everything is supposed to be contingent, and knowing that he was interested in that kind of thought and interested in that kind of fiction just really makes this entire like other layer inside of the book that's going
Yeah,
on with the author.
for sure. And he shows it so well. Like, I mean, he the David Foster Wallace loved cliches and the truth, the capital T truth, like the ancient wisdom truth that's in these cliches. He loved it. And the one liner, what the hell is water, is
Sure.
uh is in Infinite Jest, repeated twice at least, in two different parts. This kind of this joke, and it's not completely unpacked, but of course we David Foster Wallace lovers know he unpacked it in his commencement speech to Kenyon University. That's a wonderful speech. It's amazing. And it just shows how much he was aware of these cliches get played out, but they are of life and death importance to people. And I think he frames recovery and packages it in so many ways that so many people are going to resonate with it. And he takes it as far as he can in the way that he would kind of fight against it. David Foster Wallace is so good, especially in Infinite Jest, with these conversations where both of the sides are not really even having the same conversation.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking with each other, but they're not talking about the same things, and they're not commenting on what each other is saying. They're waiting politely for each other to finish. And it's like, it's progressing, but in this surreal kind of way, the conversation is going. And was a master at breaking down like a psychotherapist or something like this and their methods and this kind of thing. So he does this kind of stuff, but in Infinite Jest, all internally. It's all so much internal dialogue of these characters, their motivations and why they do what they do. And in House Story and Eridetti, it's like this self-doubt, constantly checking your ass and double checking everything, and worrying about how other people perceive you, which is a huge David Foster Wallace thing with Good Old Neon and all the other kind of things where his characters, their minds are their ultimate enemy that's going to break them and destroy them. The addiction is not, the substance is not what it is. It's the mind and what it does. And even with Hal, it's a lot of, he's addicted to the secrecy of it more than the substance itself. But we see that it just doesn't matter, because when it comes down to it, that kind of packaging for the ultimate intellectual is like a real showing of rock bottom. And he does that in Infinite Jest. And to see that and to realize that in individuals and not just one character, but many, many characters, it's heartbreaking. It's so damn sad. But he shows rock bottom like that. And the kind of final framing, this kind of walling off the seconds, because you can't think of any other time frame except for right now. And then even walling off individual moments so that you don't even think about what might be over the wall the next moment or the past or whatever, because the pain is so great, because the suffering is so great that you just live in this. It's almost like a meditative state, this kind of thing. And dealing with that when if it's like that, nothing else matters. All the intellectual gymnastics and stuff, it doesn't matter. It's fight, it's live or die, something like that. You're right.
Yeah. I think that's what makes him so interesting to read in coordination with Thomas Pynchon, who he has such an influence that he took from, because where Pynchon's strength and talent came in having just like a broader scope on human knowledge than anyone I've ever read before, of all of these different thought systems, that some of them considered legitimate, other, very occult and mystical, and
Right.
everything there. You do get the sort of like Buddhist sense reading that, of like, oh yeah, all of these are just these different commodified thought systems, and as an individual you're reduced to a sense of paranoia. Whereas I think David Foster Wallace seemed to have taken that and then turned up like the high definition on what it feels like to be an individual, with so many different options and systems to choose from, where if you're super smart and super tuned in, that's actually like a burden in some way. And the fact that he mixes it with all of these colloquialisms and kind of the Midwestern aw shucks sort of mentality too, makes it seem that it doesn't seem arrogant as much as it just seems like an extremely well done self-expression of the author. That's also been
Oh
so
yeah.
relatable to so many different people, of of
I think you're
someone
right
like
about that.
tortured by their own mind.
Yeah, after I read this, I did watch some of the reviews on Infinite Jest that I didn't watch before I read it, just
Sure.
to hear some of the stuff. And it really is like, I didn't see it as like peacocking or, showing yourself like that at all. Um, I think Leaf by Leaf had said that, Chris V over there.
Sure.
And it's just he was showing what he did. I didn't get 50% of what Infinite Jest is doing, because there's his whole structural aspect of it.
Oh yeah.
There's so much stuff to how the footnotes are laid out. At some point, they get going where it's just like this fast, and you're like, and I heard it before, like this is like a tennis match. Well, I'm not a big tennis fan at all.
Yeah.
I understand how the scoring works, I think, and I know how to play. But flipping and the way to read this book with the footnotes and stuff, at some point it was like a word or a phrase before you were jumping back to another footnote. And it was like that really quick, and then it would space out a little bit. And by the end, the footnotes are completely off the rails, like completely off the rails. You're even getting more of basic story in the footnotes, or in the end notes. And it's great, but there's this whole, like, there's so much to it that I haven't got. But there is like an overwhelming amount of like humanity that is shown in it, but it is David Foster Wallace's personal humanity. It's, and I doubt that it would get as much hell as it gets right now if David Foster Wallace was alive. Because if somebody can come up and say, say this is my experience, so sorry if you think I'm being pretentious, but this is why this resonates with me or something. That's a human. I mean, it's somebody being a human being, not somebody, it's easy to just relegate something. And David, this book has like, neon lights around it,
Mhm.
to people that are, maximalist, postmodern readers that just want big, blow my mind, get me into another place. Let me see what literature can do structurally or plot wise or anything, and just down for experimentation and creativity. And it deserves its place, but not people don't know why. People don't know why it has the place that it has.
Yeah.
They don't really know why, because you got to read it to know.
Yeah, I literally just made a TikTok about this. Is that it's like it's so interesting that this book has an enormous reputation that has almost nothing to do with what the book is actually about. Because I think
Right.
just even the title has this like monolith quality to it, and it's very clear from reading it also that he really set out to write like the book to end the 20th century. And like I don't necessarily think in those terms. So, like I don't care if it does end the 20th century or not, but like
Mhm.
this is truly like a grand statement as an artist that he was trying to make. And so I think I think that's just what people get drawn to it for, is that it's like it's a book that's really swinging for the fences. He's not
It
setting
really
out to
is.
write an easy book that's digestible, but I also
What's
don't
your
think
favorite? What's your favorite absurdity?
in Infinite Jest.
Yeah.
Oh, it's easy. I say this one every time. It's when
But
one of I forget the guy's name, but he's like a disc jockey, and then the legless wheelchair assassins put like a steam shovel on the front of their wheelchairs, and they scoop them up into the van. That's like
right.
the Looney Tunes.
Oh yeah. Well, the wheelchair assassins are so cartoonish,
Yeah,
but they're hardcore.
yeah.
Like they're freaking scary cartoons. Oh, that's great. That's really great. Maybe my favorite absurdity might be the Great Concavity. I
Yeah,
love it. I love it. I thought it
like
was
the
hilarious.
feral
Everything.
hamsters and
A gigantism infant child.
oh, that's
Like
right. That's right.
yeah,
Yeah.
an infant child the size of a high rise or something, crawling through the Great Concavity. It's just this unbelievable expanse. That's just now, but and there was this there was the thing about it where it, because of this radioactive material or something, had developed an anti-radioactive material. So it became actually there that in the Great Concavity, in parts at least, there is ultra fertile material that will take over the whole world. So they have to keep throwing more garbage in it to
Yeah.
keep it the fertility at bay. It's ridiculous.
But and you know what? That's actually very thematically intertwined with the film Infinite Jest and the whole
Right,
Alcoholics Anonymous recovery, which is that like the
right.
woman who destroys you in this life will be your mother in the next. That it's
Right. Well, and who stays through the whole film, everything, and the AA, that the recovery? It's Joelle. It's Madam Psychosis.
Mhm.
She's like the main character of the theme of what uh Infinite Jest is all about, because it's this kind of like recursive uh life after life, all due to the mother, this kind of motherly understanding, whether it's like it's not it's I don't even know how to try to interpret it. But it's just that the mother is making the choice to birth you, and therefore is the death bringer as well. Reminds me of Alan Moore's Jerusalem, where the midwives are called death mongers, and the mothers and these midwives are death mongers, is what they're called. And so it was just like there's some kind of, what are we wanting, and what are we after? And Joelle is just as broken and hurt as everybody else in this story. Joelle is Madam Psychosis, like, so the one that acted in the film and also is now just in the recovery. It's so sad. Like, what is, no, you just, there's nobody that you even look forward to saying, where are they going to be, or what is their life projected at all, with any kind of positivity, or any kind of desire to even care, really, except for Gately and Hal. You know what I mean? Like these two that, like,
well,
but
I would put one exception to that too is that Mario, I feel like he's considered not that he has an easy life by any means, but I feel like Mario is considered the sort of like heart of
yeah.
like he actually has a positive outlook. He doesn't
Well,
seem
and
to
see,
be
and
anything.
Mario too, yeah, and Mario too, but Mario is what? A mentally deficient, a mentally handicapped child. This is Hal's younger brother, Mario Incandenza. And so it took me over half of the book to realize that Mario had a mental deficiency, right?
Mhm.
Like Mario was like just there and a helper and part of the family and
But then
whatever.
also
And then,
like very physically deformed too. Like he has like a tentacle, and they say that like he is his like fontanelle is like caved in, and he's like I would imagine probably only like 3 feet tall or so. I don't remember specifically, but like he's extremely physically deformed.
it's crazy. Oh, just like, the depictions of Thanksgiving dinner at the Incandenzas. You know what I mean?
I want to
Oh,
bring this up because this is something I didn't realize the first time, but on the second read through, Joel's take on Hal at the Thanksgiving dinner is that he won't shut up, which I thought was so fascinating because
yeah, but how's the annoying younger brother, man?
no, but like the way that I had read him, since he's described as such like a husk emotionally, I just always assumed that he'd be so just withdrawn and doesn't really interact. But then to see this other character's perspective on him is that he's like actually like he's so desperate and lonely and needs attention that bad that he's just like a motor mouth. Actually, that fascinated me. That like just those tiny little details like that are like they bring so much to his character.
Yeah. Uh, you know, with Hal, it was hard for me to really locate how I feel about Hal. It really was. And it's not, I'm not, it's just because Hal doesn't have a lot of, self-expression in the book or at all. You know what I mean? He doesn't have a lot of self-expression. And I was just like, kind of, what is going on with him? What am I, what does he want? What is his motivations? These kind of things. And it is that, he's just apathetic. This kid who's still, he's still a kid, but what is he, 18,
Mhm.
But he's been in the infield tennis academy since he was 7, living there, and it's like such a weird kind of, I think I didn't really relate to. I mean, I just kind of put it like he's isolated. He doesn't really have parental. But then, as you see that the Incandenzas are the infield tennis academy.
Mhm.
Um, and the moms is always, is working there, is up in the front office, and the uncle's there and all this kind of thing all the time. That there's kind of this oppression there too. You always have your family and everything working, right there. And this secrecy is what the whole life is, what the motivation is, and the tennis has become just, the quotidian, all the tennis and all getting to a high level playing tennis is just what's going to happen. He's just going through the motions and keeping it going. But then we have, like the final 300 or 400 pages there where he just straight up has to quit. And at that point, I was like, it kind of threw me back this to Erdeti, um, right at the beginning of the book, where it is a beautiful, it's so over the top, mind numbing, just double checking yourself in this overly critical, getting marijuana to smoke for the first time, or for the last time,
Mhm.
but for the last time after how many last times.
Exactly.
But but it's wonderful how this scene is played out. I'll listen to it, uh you know and get into it, uh, and just, it's so much like that what's being said is the inner thoughts, this mind as master kind of thing. And David Foster Wallace is already given that to you, now can just show how in his brokenness, just totally broken. And
Yeah.
I didn't really like, I wasn't there with Hal, but I had to like fall back on a lot of other stuff that's in the book to understand that this is how, on the first fall, what could be many falls in his life, he could be, end up like Don Gately, for example, or somebody like that. But it was just tough to get into how. Um, but I do love it. I mean, it's ridiculous. How about let's play some Eshtaton, you know?
Oh, so this is one of the most controversial parts of
Why?
the book. Um,
Why?
I I don't know.
Because you don't play war games on a tennis court? You don't play war games on the tennis court.
I don't do anything on a tennis court. I'll admit when I first read the Eshkatan section, that was the first point in that book where I was like, no, thank you. I I
Wow.
just I just thought it slowed everything down. I did enjoy it more the second time, but it
Yeah.
just seemed, I don't even know if I could analyze it off the top of my head. I just remember it being like one of my least favorite parts of the book. Did you enjoy it?
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
really. Well,
Yeah, yeah,
what
yeah.
do you like
But
about it? I'm curious.
because it's so absurd and over the top, and I saw very quickly off the rip, this might be a thing that you can point to exactly as to enjoying it, because I have read other David Foster Wallace, that right when the Eschaton scene started, um once I was like a few few pages in, I started seeing what David Foster, that he was building this thing and gonna take it to to as far as it could go. And I was down for it. Like right when I started seeing what he was doing, I was down for it, and I was pushed. Like I got into that part because because it's just nuts. And yeah, it slows everything down. It's ridiculous. It's crazy how it, you know, is just there's rules upon rules upon rules and under, and it's just this speculative communal game that they're playing that just almost is a social construct, and a tradition. There's a tradition built up, and it's just so big. It's wonderful, and then it just disintegrates into war. It's some Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah,
you
well,
know
'cause don't they all like fight at the end?
yeah,
Doesn't it all
yeah, it
falls
breaks
apart
down
like,
into all out fight, and then I mean it's like an unprecedented state of affairs in this. It was so wild, like full on over the top, full on crazy. I was super down for it. And if you are slogging through that, it's gonna suck. It's gonna take up a lot of, it's gonna slow down the narrative. But I was, reading intently through that,
sure.
even though I could not tell you, a probably a third of the rules and what I read there.
Yeah.
But it's just the amassing it, right, that part, that kind of thing that David Foster Wallace does with like what he did with the Eschaton game is what Gaddis does, building something really big that's full of chaos. That's such like a mountain, but it's made up of chaos. It's made up of entropy, and it's just waiting to fall and crash on everybody and everything else, that kind of thing that it doesn't make sense from the start, but we've already given it some value. And now that we've placed some value somewhere with it, you know, you got some skin in the game, and we don't want to see this thing crumble, but crumbling is what it's meant to do. what it's awesome.
Okay. I
It's
think
awesome.
that's a pretty good defense of the Eshkatan section. I'll
Yeah,
file that away for maybe a third read at some point.
read it fast. Just read it fast.
Oh, I was reading it fast. Trust me. um, I did enjoy it more the second time, but I wanted to ask you, what did you think of himself's filmography? Because I remember on both reads, um, the one that sticks out the most is it's like a conceptual film where you just point at a name in a phone book and that's the film. It's like it's currently going on right now. It's the truest art because like there's no fourth wall to break. It's just going on
Right,
at a completely different thing. And then one where like there's an audience full of eyeballs and then the people on stage like humiliate themselves in order to appease the eyeballs or something like that. And just these like actually like very meaningful premises. Like you see the theme in all of these, like they just jump off the page, but at the same time, they're too much and just so navel gazing and pretentious. And like it, that's what I wish people who hadn't read this book were more aware of. Is that that book is or Infinite Jest is very much in dialogue with the kind of hyper conceptual, postmodern, everything
right,
is a symbol kind of writing. You know?
right. And dude, David Foster Wallace was so aware of all that, all of the landscape that it was that he's putting this out there into, but also his own motivations, his own like kind of failings, it could be said,
Sure.
not having a not ha- limits to having a broader perspective or something like that. It might be said, something like that. But I think that when it comes down to it, he knew, and an astute kind of reader will know that you can't do any more than what you can do, you know, and like your limitations and the kind of things that you're doing have to be brought into bear and have their say and whatever. And he uses his own limitations in his books and in his art and in himself's movies, cartridges. Um, I think he was also using the limits to his uh of his movie making ability, of his cinematography, to in an aware way on his movies. It says over and over that he was more aware of the lens. He was more aware of the lens, the lenses in which these things are captured than he is the movies themselves or something, or other aspects of the movie making, and was hyper aware of the audience, the other, the other than himself, right? Like even his name is such a symbol, and made into a symbol. And the moms being so much more of a impersonal thing than himself. Himself has a selfhood. Himself is part of you. How? Right? And you as a reader. The moms is even more separate, and is above, and just the moms is a character that is so capable, amazingly capable. She's what's held together the family, this dysfunctional Incandenza family. But Hal doesn't, really relate to her. I mean, she's had an affair with John Wayne since he started the thing, and he's never said anything about it. Well, why wouldn't you? You can walk. She doesn't have a door on her office, so somebody walks into the office while some weird stuff's going on, right? Her little affair with John Wayne, and it's like, and he doesn't have a conversation about that. She's entirely open for that type of conversation. It drives it home over and over that she is just completely open with her kids and things like this. And so Hal being withdrawn, her being the moms and this kind of thing, and himself being, it's so, there's so much symbolism, and you get, as the only dialogue left is you reading the book Infinite Jest, which is actually the name of the cartridge as well. So what is that? And then you're figuring out, what is that? Like what is that? What is even all this about, in a way? And it turns out to be Joelle, the most beautiful, woman in the world, playing the role of the mother, playing the role of the sweetheart that you haven't seen in years, or some, whatever. And they're going around the turnstile, or a revolving door at some points, just saying hey to each other. It's just this kind of fun serendipity kind of rom-com thing. And then there's this kind of thing where she's kneeling over a crib. So you got the most beautiful woman in the world, kneeling over a crib, and the viewer is in the crib. So you're from the perspective of the baby, and she's just apologizing for 20 minutes. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. So like, and then you're like, wait, why? Then that's when that kind of thing. And then I was thinking, why? Well, now he's really trying to give a reason, at least for himself, David Foster Wallace himself, to make sense out of, an aspect of reality. Well, what is that? What aspect, what kind of part of his reality is he talking about with that kind of thing? And it's so interesting just to get into this kind of stuff.
Well, so I want to take a stab at that, because I think that is without a doubt one of the most haunting and compelling images in anything that I've ever read or seen in a movie. Like, that is something that I didn't even interpret it the first time that I read it. I was just like, this
What, Joelle over the crib?
Joel over the crib. And I think they describe it as that, like, himself builds a lens to actually simulate what it would look like as an infant. It was like a bobble lens or something that he called it,
Mm-hmm.
so that like
Mm-hmm.
he actually puts you in that state. And
Right.
correct me if I'm wrong, but hasn't her face been splashed with acid at this point?
I didn't realize. I assumed no, because
Okay.
Oren was dating her, right?
During
Oren
the
was
film?
dating her. Hal was like before he went to the tennis academy. So he's like 6.
Mhm.
He's a kid. So Oren is dating her, and they're at Thanksgiving dinner. And that's when Oren is dating her, that's when himself is using her in the films,
Okay. So but
or soon after. But when did the splash, when did the acid happen? I don't know. It doesn't
Okay.
really.
In either case, though, because whether or not it's there at the time of the filming, what I take that image to be, or like what I've pieced it together since reading it, is that I think that that's tying back into that um, main theme of like the woman who kills you in this life is your mother in the next life, and so then she is like the mother who has basically created the desire dynamic that makes you addicted to things in general. So like it's kind of laid out in the almost like platonic conversation between Marat and Helen Steepley in the desert when they're talking about Helen of Troy, but like the woman who's so beautiful it launched 1,000 ships. And Helen Steepley's like, oh well, but what if you just can't help but be hopelessly drawn to something because you love it so much, you have so much desire. And then Marat is like, oh well, in that case, you are a slave to yourself, you're a slave to your own desire. And
Right.
so what I take the film to be is that like they're taking this beautiful woman and almost drawing on like an Oedipal complex of like your mom is what teaches you a sense of romantic desire toward the other women in your life. And so she's basically apologizing to you for being like, it's bigger than the both of us. Like I didn't want to do this to you, but this is what I had to do, you know?
Nice.
And
Yeah.
then I don't know what it means though, the fact that that's couched inside of this film though, because that's not the
Yeah.
image of the book, that's the like constructed image of this conceptual filmmaker within the book.
Yeah, but that film is the film that is the desire to end all desires. There's something about the film that satiates even the desire to live, to where you don't even desire to live anywhere. You don't desire anything except the film because it takes care of everything. So what would that be? I mean, it has to be an ultimate euphoric enlightenment experience, this kind of thing. But where would it come from? Like having everything justified and also, you cradled and loved and held. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the whole gamut. It would have to be the whole uh all satisfaction or something. So with it, I don't know if I knew I did assume that with the filmmaking that she was wearing, that she wasn't in the veil. But it does make it is so interesting that Madame Psychosis, the most beautiful woman in the world, throughout most, if not all of the book, is covered in a veil. Not because she's hiding her beauty, but because her face is the only part of her that is deformed now. And then it's like, what is, you know, what it, what's the point? What's the point? Like that whole of the big, of Infinite Jest, or what David Foster Wallace was doing, I think is multifaceted. And I think it's
Oh, sure.
big, like big and multifaceted. So it doesn't serve to kind of like want a reductive answer to that, but that's what people that, are gonna give Infinite Jest a lot of flack. That's what they're gonna say. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot to criticize. I wouldn't ever say this is like a perfect book,
Oh no, it's
you know.
grotesque. It's like an entirely
Right,
it's a
right.
pile of something. Like it's
Dude, in the middle, dude, three people were saying, they were ahead of me in the reading group, and they were like on page 3 or 400 when I just was like at page 100. And I'm like, don't worry, guys, I'll catch up. I'm a quick reader, quick enough. I mean, I had given myself 2 months to read it,
mm,
so I wasn't worried about it. I said, yo, I'll read it. I'll catch up, no worries.
yeah,
And by the time I read 400 pages, it felt like I read 1,000.
yeah.
And then for like 400 pages in the middle, maybe 500 pages, it's such a mess, like how it's jumping. And you don't even get segues between different storylines that are happening a lot of times. And I was just like, and you're jumping to fucking in notes and all this stuff so much. It's ridiculous what it's doing. So I was just like, it's tough. It's something that I would never say is just like, an end all beat all, or, a great a thing that everybody should read, something like that. No,
No, no, no, no. Yeah.
it is for if you want a maximalist novel, if you read David Foster Wallace and like what he does, his hyper critical, hyper realism, absurdist, surreal take on uh the world and pushing things as far as he can go, do it. Go for Infinite Jest because it's awesome like that, you know. But
Well, that's where I think it succeeds, is just that it's like I've said this about other maximalist stuff, is that like it just confronts you with something bigger than yourself. Like it would
yeah,
be truly impossible to absorb everything in one read through. And so I think that's why this book changed the game for me so much, because I had never read a postmodern book before I read Infinite Jest. You know, I
nice.
just went to college, and I shit you not, I just went online and I was like, best books written in the last 20 years. And it was like number one on this some random list. And I was
Right.
like, all right, good enough for me. And I I'd been reading John Irving, who's like, he has like a little bit of intertextuality, metafiction, but it's like a very easy read comparatively. And then David Foster Wallace literally just makes you, it's like, say, throw out everything that you know, but I'm going to make it worth it with how fun it is. That's
It
been
is
my
fun.
experience anyway.
God, it's so fun. It's fun as hell, even though you're like crying
Yeah.
inside while you're reading about these characters. So that's really awesome. uh for Infinite Jest to be one of your first thing. And yeah, David Foster Wallace, as far as his you know what he really is doing, I can't even wrap my head around um the breadth the breadth of it, you know, really. I will say that one thing that struck me about Infinite Jest is the complete lack of religious iconography or spirituality, maybe not, you know, universal spirituality, but kind of especially really religious ideas. Obviously, all the incandenzas are atheists. Most of everybody in the book is an atheist, an intellectual, materialistic atheist, right?
Mhm.
Um, and as are some of our addicts, right? So
Yep.
that when it comes down to it, there is an exploration of the search for a higher power, putting your you know, submitting to a higher will, a higher power, whatever that might be, especially in the AA sections. But what one thing that Infinite Jest does, or what one thing that David Foster Wallace does with Infinite Jest is make create a redemptive kind of savior figure completely in the secular world.
Mhm.
And that's Don Gately
Yeah.
in this. And he creates somebody that, you know, I knew Don Gately for a couple of hundred pages, maybe 300 pages, maybe, you know, before I gave a damn about Don Gately. He was one of the other addicts at In It House that, you know, was a whose life was a wreck, but he was getting his shit together, and he was taking the car out for joyrides when he was buying supplies
Mhm.
for the kitchen. And he's still a wild ass, but he's not throwing his life away on, you know, dope. Fine, it's good, you know, and you give him that and you're just going along on his story. But you know, there's something to be said about throwing characters and people, because these you know, at least symbolically represent, which David Foster Wallace was really aware, real people, throwing somebody into um a complete, unbelievably painful and suffering kind of situation, a hardship that you don't know if you yourself um would come out on the other side, you know, just an unbelievable amount of pain and hurt and this kind of thing. And that kind of thing, I don't think I've ever been through something that really did it the way that David Foster Wallace does it, because with Don Gately's story, there's amount of pacing to how deep you get into his depravity. You don't get his ultimate depravity until the end
Right.
of his story.
Mm.
And you start off with his trying to recover. I love the scene where, he goes to one of his first meetings and they're all hugging. No, they go out to another, In House goes out to another group and they all hug. Like at the end of their meeting, they all hug each other. And he kind of goes over to the side and he's standing off to himself and he's like, don't this big, thuggish kind of African American guy walks up to him and he's like, "Hey, Don Gately goes, hey, I'm not a hugger." And the guy goes, "Oh, so what? You think I'm a hugger? You think I'm somebody that walks around hugging people all the time? I just want to hug people. I ain't no hugger. This ain't me living my best life right here. I'm doing this because I care about you, you care about me, and you get over here and give me a hug, or I'll rip off your head and take a crap down your throat."
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Right. And he says that, and it's just like, this is Don's path. Him understanding that this person doesn't want to hug him any more than he wants to hug him. But connection is essential. David Foster Wallace, all these characters are islands of consciousness unto themselves. It's so sad how isolated everybody is in Infinite Jest, and constantly a lot of the characters are fighting against connection with people. They're actively avoiding connection. They call it interfacing because they can't even call it conversations anymore. Everything is so effed.
Yeah.
And in this, you fall in love with Don Gately in a way, because he goes through an ultimate, he does commit some kind. I mean, David Foster Wallace does it so well, because there's a scene of self-sacrifice where Don Gately actually does put himself in a death situation where he could die for another person, a horrible person, for somebody as a reader you don't care about, and you're like, he's a bad
Randy
dude.
Lenz, right?
Lenz, right?
Oh,
You
who's
you
such
don't.
a dirtbag. Yeah.
He's such a dirtbag, and Gately puts himself on the line. He could die for this other person, and you don't want it. And then afterwards, you just hoping that he doesn't die. And then he's met Joelle in this recovery house, and you're just like hoping. There's some reason why you're hoping. And I'm like, where is this hope coming from? What has David Foster Wallace done to me right now? Why is Gately, why do I feel this way about Gately? What is going on? And Gately is in his recovery in the hospital and all this kind of, his showdown at the Boston AA. I mean, what a scene.
That sequence is astonishing. Like,
It's amazing.
it's so cinematic and completely just leads you up to everything. But when you were saying that, I think it's so interesting too to consider David Foster Wallace's other work and how he might have picked Gately to be that savior figure, because since he had so many demons himself, and he would always talk about like his own arrogance about his intellect, and like feeling bored when other people were speaking, and then feeling guilty that he was bored when other people were speaking, and
Right.
like you
Right.
you can really see how he hated that part of himself that wanted to be the smartest. And so like I think that's why Hal ends up like bleeding like a goat at the beginning, and like he just loses all contact with people. And so this, I see Gately as David Foster Wallace's like own wish to be like, if only I could be like simpler and just appreciate a rule for a rule's sake and not question it and not over intellectualize it, and to actually like want to be emotionally present with other people, because
Right.
that's what it ultimately is about. with
Right.
all of these different addiction issues is that willingness to be present and open. And one of my favorite lines in the book too about the Incandenza family is that like they confused overt eccentricity with openness. And so like they thought if they
Right.
were big and eccentric, then that was the same thing as really being present with someone else. And that resonated with me so much. I've done a lot of like performing in my life and been in theater and film and stuff like that. And there is like a super intense loneliness that comes along with being really big and fun, but then just realize you were talking past each other and like you're
Right.
so desperate for that connection and it's just not working out.
Right. Right. And that talking past each other, that's what I'm talking about with like his uh deft ability at conversation, sometimes between people that are trying to figure each other out. I think of Marath's conversation with this woman. I don't know who he's talking with somebody from the In It recovery house,
Oh, it's
somebody in,
Kate Gompert, I think.
yeah, and he's telling her his wife's story,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
How she's
Yeah.
like in the
And,
hospital
and
or something, or like
well, and no, yeah, well, he's telling how he met her, and it's ridiculous. It's one of the most absurd things in the world. In the book, like his wife is her part of her brains are spilling out and being caught in this receptacle
oh,
or
that's
something,
right.
you know, and yeah, and she just like she can't talk, she can't move. It's so weird. Everything's so weird. And she's convinced that he's an addict, right? But
Yeah.
he's really the wheelchair assassin. If anybody hasn't read it, that is still listening to this.
There's no way. There's no way if you made it this far.
But I'm like, is this a lie that Marath is making up, or is this the actual story of his wife or whatever? But he marries her. He talks about their wedding as he, pulls her down the aisle as a vegetative uh wheelchair bound woman. It's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. And she's like, oh, you saved yourself from recovery. You saved yourself from being an addict by um being a hero, by marrying this woman and being a hero. And he's like, no, and it's like, and he's talking about their relationship, and they're both completely on different levels with what they're talking about. It's wild. How David Foster Wallace can just go into that stuff, and it's so hilarious in that way. But then also on the flip side, like in Infinite Jest, there's always two or more facets of what's being shown, because on the flip side of that exact thing, there's so much symbolism that's shown of people hurting because of not having the connection, um and not having real conversation with people, and being so isolated. And it's just like, man, I mean, it's wild. I can't wait to reread it. I really will. um I think what I'll do is maybe just kind of um go through, and I mean, I started rereading it. I read the whole first part again. How, the year of the trial size dove bar. Is
Sure.
that the one that is the first chapter or something?
Or I won't check it
The
out. Yeah. Or he's in the
it's
admissions office, right?
Yeah, the first, which the beginning of the book, which is actually the last chronologically. So I read that again afterwards, and it was so enjoyable getting into the book. And like, once I had all of the story to start again with what David Foster Wallace did, because again, I got to the Erdeti part where he's talking about, putting the cockroaches in containers so he doesn't have to kill them, so they die from asphyxiation, these sewer cockroaches that come up out of his bathtub. And he, just puts bowls over glass domes over them and lets them die of suffocation, and then sweeps them out because he doesn't want to kill them or something. And it's so good and over the top, just this overthinking And one of the guys in the group that we read it with said that, David Foster Wallace is a great overthinker. And he really is. I mean, the overthinking is some of the best that you'll ever read. It's so wonderful because you laugh at it and you see yourself in it
Oh my
and you
God, yeah.
chastise it and you do all the things with it.
I've heard people refer to him as like the neurotic whisperer because he's just so good at tapping into that, and you really just get this great sense of somebody who's obviously like very coddled, very privileged, very smart, but just a like mess, an absolute mess in their relationships, and they can't enjoy themselves. The main comparison I can think, and I don't know if Charlie Kaufman had read Infinite Jest, but have you read Ant Kind yet?
I have not.
Oh no, I mean,
Seriously, right now.
you're gonna love it, man. Like it I just all the books that you read. So like
I
won't
love
give
I
you
love Charlie Kaufman. I love Charlie Kaufman's movies. I
it's
can't believe I didn't get to it this year, Antkind.
make sure to read. I would put it in sometime in your 2022 because
I'm doing it.
the neuroticism of this main character is just hilarious. Like he just one tiny little detail. It doesn't really spoil anything. Is that
Sure.
he's a film critic, and so he watches every film 7 times in order to like really absorb it. And like one of the times is that he turns the projector upside down to see how gravity influences the narrative action on the film.
Nice.
So like that's kind of what you can look forward to in Ant Kind. Is it's just like it is goofy, and he like outdoes
Yeah.
himself somehow. But
Well, I mean, and there's a lot of prescience in David Foster Wallace Infinite Jest. I don't think I wouldn't okay, I don't want to say there's a bit of prescience in Infinite Jest, and I don't but not a lot, but it's when he really pushes the satirical the satirical aspect of what he's doing, that this kind of um prescient kind of thing comes through, because there's this whole section close to the beginning, maybe in the first third of it, where it's talking about how they had rolled out these video phones. They rolled out, and it gets big into the industry and the commercialization of this and how it worked for a while, and then there was this backlash and what the industry did to offset the backlash. And why is because people didn't want they didn't want their face on the video. They were self-conscious.
sure.
So they started wearing masks, and then it keeps progressing to where then it's just an avatar.
Mhm.
So why are you calling somebody up and doing a video phone with an avatar? What you could just call somebody. So they go back to the original, and they just go back to voice phone like that. But that kind of thing, it was funny, and it was David Foster Wallace for sure. Total David Foster Wallace thing to do. But at the end of it, what does it really mean? He didn't have a real grasp of what the future might hold. He's just really pushing things to their limit. The kind of things that were pointed out is like kind of a digital, there's a pointing to a digital medium of media exchange, and also wireless phones, which all weren't, there when he wrote Infinite Jest. So, but it was really cool.
That's why
Uh,
I think it is kind of a relief that he wrote it in the 90s because it doesn't seem to like really fall victim to a lot of the pitfalls of other people trying to integrate social media into modern movies and fiction. Because
sure.
as much as this book is about entertainment and about people being a slave to their own desires and that sort of thing, so much of it is really driven by the scenes and by these actual
Right.
interactions that people have.
Right.
So
Well, I mean, dude, most of it really struck me more on the level of something like Kubrick's um kind of depiction of Clockwork Orange,
Mhm.
because you have like, them racing down the uh street with a VW bug is on the road. And the guy in the house is using the telephone. And this kind of retro uh sci-fi, kind of a
Sure. Yeah.
retro future. And that's Infinite Jest falls more in that kind of way back. It falls back to like late 80s, early 90s sci-fi more than it goes forward to things like uh sci-fi that is trying to integrate uh internet or a communication system that everybody has access to, and these kind of nets where there's like a governmental conversation going on, and you can there's a lot of sci-fi that even has predicted things like internet and things like a communication system. His characters and his world is very, very chopped up and isolated unto itself. Everybody, all things, even the cartridge viewing, it's a lot of this kind of private media consumption. The it's so it's fun. It's fun in that way. That kind of thing was fun to me to experience, because who doesn't love some kind of future or kind of retro of future sci-fi? It was so good to kind of see how he plays these things. But there's criticisms there. There's criticisms about a lot of things
Sure.
that Infinite Jest is. And I just want to say, I mean, I'm not sitting here putting together an essay, or an exploration one way or the other, but I do appreciate reading it. It was really, really worth the read for sure. And
Understatement. Yeah.
man, I mean, dude, I'm so happy because like I had said earlier, I didn't really plan on reading this book this year until I bought it. I found it in a used bookstore um earlier this, like halfway through the year, and I was like, well, now that I own it, it's gonna finish up my big book reading for 2021. And dude, it definitely delivered.
It is definitely a book that lives up to its reputation, I think. It is something like nothing can really prepare you for it, because for as like conceptual and postmodern as it is, like we've been saying, it like the scenes and these characters and how much humanity that there's is in it, I think that gets overshadowed by this reputation and by like how
It
difficult
really does. It
it,
really does.
it's astonishing. Just like these characters that he has invented. And like I said too, it's like if you're a fan of Pynchon, you'll see the Pynchon in there, but then he took it in this completely other direction too. That
Oh yeah.
really separates himself from the people who influenced him.
Oh yeah.
Like, are you a DeLillo fan, by the way? Because I'm pretty sure this is my theory. I can't prove this, but I think Madame Psychosis was inspired by a character in Americana, which
Nice.
was Don DeLillo's first novel.
Nice. I haven't read it.
Okay, so I won't get too into it, but he does like a radio program where he has some like very ranty kind of disjointed musings about different things. And the other comparison too, which I do know is an influence, is David Lynch, and he specifically writes about this in an essay on David Lynch. And I think this is at the core of the aesthetic of Infinite Jest, that he said David Lynch was about making every single thing normal and then have one haunting detail stick out that you
Right.
just can't get out of your head. And I think that that is like that's what Infinite Jest feels like. Is it's like it's the
The
Hal
Ray.
denying himself, and then the wraith, or it's the day-to-day at AA, and then them holding up himself's head with the cartridge in it.
Right.
And
Right. Yeah.
all of those things, like they just completely disturb you, but it's just enough. It's just these little moments of it that keep you like turning the pages to look for more of it.
Right. And I mean, he had a great sense of doing that. He had a an amazing sense of what he was doing. Um in the storytelling, but also in interjecting these kind of things that are totally powerful to the themes that he was exploring and how he's doing it, what he wanted to do. And there is things, it's funny how you described something earlier as cinematic, and there is a cinematic element to Infinite Jest for sure, in the subject matter and how it's presented on the page, like narratively. But some of these cinematic elements are something that in a movie would be shown in 5 minutes, that
Oh, sure.
on the page are 30 pages long.
Right.
40 pages long, I mean, the showdown at the Boston AA, how long does that take on a movie? 15 minutes, 10 minutes?
Yeah, it's just a sequence.
It's like 30 pages,
Yeah. But you're with it. You're with it the whole, like, it
You're
doesn't
with it,
flow.
and you're
You're
just
like,
but dude,
yeah.
and see, and I hate to bring it up again, but I'm gonna bring it up again because it's my favorite book that I read this last year. The same kind of thing with that reminds me again of Alan Moore's Jerusalem, because there's a situation that's going on, and 200 pages later, you're still aching for some resolution to a situation, and you're like, wow, what is he doing? How is this situation still going on? How is the author doing this? And it's a cool thing to see play out and to experience as a reader. A seemingly action-packed scene that fills all of your senses, just keeps going, keeps giving you more and more and more, all the way to where you all and a lot of readers are going to say, okay, this is enough. Right?
Mhm.
A lot of readers, I mean, and I got there with a lot of scenes with Infinite Jest, where I was like, I got it, Jesus, but he still wants to give you more, and he gives you more because he's got to take you to his depth, not your depth, not whatever, but his depth. This is a very much an outpouring of David Foster Wallace and what he's about, what he had in his mind, and what his life, how he looked at being a human being, and obviously had his mind going at 100 miles an hour all the time. It's wild.
Yeah.
David Foster Wallace, man.
I think
Jesus.
that might be a good spot to end it. So,
Bro. Daniel, thank you so much, man.
absolutely. I'm glad we got the opportunity to do it. Like, so fresh off of your last read, and I
Yeah,
haven't read
and
this
this is
book in
perfect.
7 years, so it's been fun.
Tomorrow I will do a film, a video of my non-spoiler kind of take.
Sure.
So I'm gonna do that, but then I'm gonna pop this and that, if I can, out on my channel. This is gonna be fun, and because when it comes down to it, man, you can never talk about and really explore everything that he's trying to do with this. So, I mean, the best that I can do is turn some people onto it to really experience it for what it is.
Absolutely. And I hope this conversation will be a good resource, because we did get into many spoilers in this. Good resource for people who've read it before, and maybe they need to be encouraged to read it again. Because
Yeah.
I'm not ready for a third. I plan on a third, but it's still too soon. 7 years is too soon. Maybe when I'm 40, that'll be what I'm ready for.
Nice. Cool. Well, hey, I'm down for the buddy read when you are. That'll be my second time.
All right, sounds good. You'll be the first person I tell.
Very cool, Daniel. Thank you very much, brother.
All right, signing off, BookTube. This has been Off the Wall Novels with special guest Noah Clemens. From everyone who reads it must converse. You all have a good day.